Academica Media. You are listening to Charter School Superstars, bringing you the voices of an education revolution.
Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Ryan Kairalla. Our guest this week on the program is a celebrated education marketing expert who specializes in enrollment marketing and branding for charter schools. Recently, our guest has worked closely with Charter School Capital on their projects, and you can find out more about our guest's work by visiting www.charterschoolcapital.com. We are happy to welcome Michael Barber on a Charter School Superstars. Hi, Michael.
Hey, Ryan. How are you?
I am doing well. I love talking to the marketing people. You guys, you always seem the best suited for podcast interviews. You probably do a bunch of these just by virtue of being in marketing. So I know this is going to be a pretty fun conversation for me. And let me start with this. Though I know you do a lot of your work in education marketing, including marketing for charter schools, you also have a wide range of marketing clients in a lot of industries. So I'm curious, what got you interested in the education industry, specifically from a marketing standpoint?
So I was one of those individuals in college who was very, very prepared to be a teacher. I actually applied for Teach for America, was accepted. And if you've never been through the TFA program, the Teach for America program, you get to pick 10 cities. And I hoped by picking 10 cities that I would get one of those cities. I did not, however, get one of those cities.
You got none of the 10?
I got none of the 10, and wow. I did not think of the place that they put me was going to be the right place for me. So I politely declined, but my interest in education and teaching has, been around since I was a kid. And when I had the chance to leverage the skill set that I've spent the last 16 years working on for education with Charter School Capital, and now with over 50 schools that we've worked with over the past several years, it's a really rewarding way to be able to marry what pays me and also the passion that I've had for teaching and education in years past.
And it's one of the things that I really like the most about the charter school movement is just by virtue of the fact that it kind of marries all these different industries together, is you get to bring in a lot of really talented professionals who might not otherwise have considered or had a career in education because maybe they aren't teachers or they don't work for the government in like a public school district. And it provides a forum for those experts to come into the fold, either through a vendor or on a charter school board or something like that. So you really get this really cool enrichment of the private sector, of the nonprofit sector into education. You get to benefit from a lot of terrific minds across industries, and charter schools really get to be the beneficiary of that. I love it. And one of the ways that you help charter schools in the marketing space is in what I think is probably one of the most important aspects of charter school marketing, which is branding. A lot of charter schools that I have the pleasure of working with and talking to on this program are great at branding. They have these very distinctive brands that no matter where you are in the country, you know that charter school, whether it's KIPP or Somerset or Slam or something, you're like, oh yeah, that's a great school. And you don't even need to walk into that campus to already have an opinion of it because of how great their brand is. I want to hear more of your perspective on this. What does effective branding look like to you in the charter school space?
So branding really comes down to two things for me. There's two sides of branding, and that's visual identity and visual image. One we can control, one we can't. So visual identity are all the things that make and give you that distinction in the marketplace, like a KIPP, like a basic, and the like, right? It's the logo. It's the font choice. It's the colors. It's the way you talk. What is your voice and tone as a brand, as a school? That's visual identity. Those are all things we can control. The second part of branding is visual image. Image is something we can try to control, but ultimately it is the public. It is your consumers that define what your visual image is, right? It's what they think when they see your logo, when they see an ad from your school or from your brand. I think when you've sort of nailed it on the head, if you will, when it comes to the schools that do this really, really well, it is the fact that if the logo fell off, the website, the ad, whatever the vehicle is that you're utilizing from an advertising perspective, you would still know that it is that brand. And that is the holy grail when it comes to branding, is that if the logo falls off and a customer, a student, a parent, a community member could read your thing and know it was your school, you've hit the sweet spot. It is really hard to do, But when you get to that place where the logo can fall off and yet someone can know that that's your brand, that is really branding success when it comes to really any organization, but charter schools as well.
How do schools get there? It sounds like if you're trying to create that idea in the minds of consumers, no matter whether your school campus is the one in Florida or the one in Colorado or the one in California, that has to be an all hands on deck effort from your board to your administrators to your teachers, even to your student body and your parents. Everybody has to participate in the propagation and the strength of that brand. How does a school make that happen? How do you get that kind of buy-in?
Culture really drives brand at the end of the day. A strong culture creates an incredible brand. You can have a beautiful visual identity, right? The one part of branding. You can have the most amazing logo. You can have the most amazing school experience. You can have whatever X, Y, and Z is. But ultimately what drives if a brand is going to be successful and if your branding is effective is just how good and impactful your culture is internally amongst your students, amongst your staff, amongst your community members, amongst your influence, amongst all of those influencers in the space. That's what really drives an incredible brand effort.
And again, I am so inspired by a lot of charter school networks in having that amazing brand, which, as you astutely noted, is a product of the investments in culture that they make every single day. So that whether you're walking onto a school campus in one state or if you're at that organization's campus on the other side of the country, the culture is unified. You know that that brand is there, even as you noted, if the logo were to fall off. I would say in addition to branding, though, Michael, another aspect of marketing with respect to charter schools that I think is on the top of mind of most administrators, particularly with everything that's going on right now, is enrollment marketing, using marketing as a vehicle to let potential parents know that your school exists, that your school is excellent, and maybe you might want to enroll your children in that school when they get of age. And it's a tricky area. It's an area where, with the emergence of the pandemic, a lot of traditional methods of enrollment marketing suddenly didn't become available to schools anymore, and they had to rely more on technology than they would have before. Can you talk a little bit about the evolution in enrollment marketing for charter schools that you're seeing lately?
For sure. I mean, for years, the best, bar none, beyond any sort of marketing tactic, the biggest single driver when it comes to success for enrollment is word of mouth. So as a marketer and a brand exercise, everything we're trying to do for schools is how do we support word of mouth and how do we drive word of mouth as well? Because that touches on foundationally every element of marketing, from awareness, right? Students and parents getting to know that our school exists, through consideration. They're comparing their options. They've narrowed them down. They've done their research, all the way through what we consider a conversion event, like an enrollment in this case of a school. And then, of course, loyalty and retention. We want to keep that student at our school for the foreseeable future, for the grades that we educate our students in, right? So it's all parts of that. And what drives every part of that is word of mouth. So ultimately, as we think about enrollment, it's what can we do within awareness, consideration, conversion, and then loyalty and retention to really drive that marketing experience with a prospective student and then our current students and community at large, those being parents and grandparents and ambassadors of our brand. Specifically around the evolution, what's been really interesting, if you look at the pandemic as sort of an inflection point, we did a lot of the sort of tried and true things as marketers do when it comes to charter schools for driving awareness. Things like search marketing, pay-per-click, display ads, banner advertising, those sorts of things. Email marketing for consideration, right? You get someone to your page, they give you your email address, you start talking to them about what your school does, driving them into an enrollment conversation. Hopefully getting them on campus to have a tour, to do an open house, and then hopefully selecting your school. What we've seen over the last few years is, yes, those things all have downline impacts on actually converting students and driving enrollment. But the channels with which our parents and our students are finding out about schools, are considering schools, are often very different than what they were before. Those tried and true places, search marketing, organic search marketing, banner advertising, email marketing, they're still there and they're still driving incredible success for schools. But things like anything related to video, the rise of TikTok, the rise of YouTube ads, the rise of really anything around motion and images and video has had a huge impact on enrollment efforts, especially over the last 12 months. I was actually just talking to some of our project managers and the leader of our enrollment team at Charter School Capital, and we were looking at our last season of enrollments over the summer. And probably the biggest insight that came out of that work over the past 6 to 12 months is just how much impact video and video advertising is having on generating awareness and consideration and conversion for charter schools.
That's fascinating to me, because when I think of the places or the audiences that are watching video advertising on the internet on platforms like YouTube, or as you mentioned, TikTok, I'm not thinking parents. I'm thinking younger people. Are you like, so what is causing the success of video? Is it that kids are watching a TikTok video about a charter school and they're telling their parents about it? Like, how is this cool video content making its way to the parental decision maker?
Yeah, in some cases, it's not necessarily a direct effort of the school. And this is where things become really challenging for a school when you consider brand and culture, is that a lot of success we've seen is actually students at schools and or teachers or administrative professionals, leaders of schools with their own channels. And
really?
Yes. And
like
that
principals as thought leaders. I love it.
Yes. And, tapping into cultural trends, you think about TikTok videos. If your audience isn't familiar, one of the things that drives a lot of views is background music and certain cultural memes. And you have any number of teachers and or, principals and school leaders that are tapping into these moments and sharing how that moment may relate to what they do professionally and giving it a creative spin. And suddenly that video's got 300,000 or 400,000 views. And it's those sorts of opportunities. And that presents any number of challenges, right? Suddenly, it's not only the school that is really driving enrollment success and awareness success of that school, it's also your employees, your team members, right? And that becomes not only just a logistical challenge to how do you maintain relationships with your team so that they're talking about you in a favorable light, but that it's reflective of the actual experience inside the school. So that's sort of, one of the interesting things that's happening in video. But the other thing you've got to realize is that we've got parents, the 35 to 45-year-old demographic, and even below that age who have got school-age children, they're spending an enormous amount of time consuming video. It's something at this point, 25 hours a month is the average viewership time of an average TikTok user. And an average TikTok user is about 28 to 37 years old right now. So
really,
this is where people are spending time. And I think that's, as a school leader, you've got to start to consider that the tried and true methods of enrollment, sure, they work and they'll continue to sort of generate your averages that you're looking for. But as we think about what we need to do in the future to really get eyeballs and drive consideration for our schools, we're going to have to start to think about how these other places, these other mediums become really impactful for our organizations.
Okay. I had some other questions about drier concepts of marketing, but now I want to lean into this because this fascinates me, because it is something I get questions on a lot from administrators. And I've actually, as a lawyer, I've actually led some sessions on social media and staff in your school and things like that. And I want to get your perspective on this, because what I'm hearing from you is that if we can put our educators and our principals and our administrators in a position to be influencers and thought leaders on these video platforms, that can drive engagement from and potentially lead to enrollments because of the way it funnels. But at the same, and so on one hand, I want to encourage these professionals to do cool things on TikTok and on social media. And when it's done well, not only does it create benefits for the school, but it also helps enrich that particular professional. You can turn a teacher in one classroom into something of a celebrity, of a thought leader who's out giving TED Talks. That being said, I have also seen plenty of examples of it going wrong, of a teacher in a TikTok video bad-mouthing their school or accidentally divulging the private information of a student or family. And so how do you advise that schools handle this balance so that they can use this very powerful form of media as a force for good and not have it potentially ruin the career of a teacher?
Yeah, there has to be an operating framework between schools and their teachers and social media. It doesn't necessarily have to, in speaking to a lawyer, maybe put the earmuffs on for a second. But I would
Yeah, let's take
encourage
my
it to
headphones
be.
off. Go
There
ahead,
you
just tell
go. There you
everybody.
go.
Yeah.
I would just encourage everyone to make it as plain spoken as possible. Here are some basics. You do not show students' faces unless there's some sort of agreement between students and parents and the schools that is part of their enrollment contract, and it's a known thing that happens. But typically, you're not showing student interactions. Number two, before you air something on social media, you've brought it to the organization's leadership, right? That this is something that, if shared, often issues, when we talk about, regardless of charter school teachers and teachers in general, when they've got a grievance, it's because they haven't been heard. So we as leaders have to give our charter school teachers and teachers in general the ability to air their challenges, whether that's down to open office hours with our school leaders, or there's an actual process for delivering that sort of feedback. You have to give teachers the ability to say, this is what I'm struggling with. Not actually creating that content and publishing it during school hours, right? That we're not somehow taking away from the learning experience. Maybe we're adding on to it, but if the recording happens, we're not sitting there and actually doing it in between breaks. It happens potentially out of school hours. You may have to, if you, depending upon situations you've had in the past, have an approval framework and process to say what can be shared and what cannot be shared, that at least allows school leadership to see what sort of content is being created. All of that really comes down to the relationship that a school has with its teachers. But what we know is that people are attracted to ordinary people, right? That the trend lines tell us in social media that gone are the days are these influencers that have these perfect lives. What people are attracted to, especially in TikTok, especially in Instagram these days, and Instagram Reels and the evolution of these social networks, is real, ordinary people. And that means exactly, it's authenticity down to the wire. It is allowing our greatest advocates, which are our students, which are our teachers, which are our board members, which are people in the community, to act as advocates for us, whether they're doing that in person or whether they're doing it online.
See, viewers and listeners, did I not tell you that when the marketing people come to Charter School Superstars, it's always a fun conversation? We've already taught you how to create an army of influencers on your school campus. We're going to turn your entire staff into amazing influencers that are creating cool TikToks and YouTube videos that are going to be driving enrollment. I love it. You can find out more about our guest projects by visiting charterschoolcapital.com. Our guest is Michael Barber. This has been a treat. Michael, before we let you go, one last question I'd love to run by you. If with the snap of your fingers, you could make any change to the education system, what change would it be?
Oh, Ryan, I think the easy one here is, double, triple every teacher's salary, right? I think you've probably heard that maybe 100 times.
Never gets old.
I think, right. I think the harder one is I would love to give teachers more autonomy. The idea of school choice for parents and in respect to charter schools, and the ability to choose where you educate your kids, should be allowing parents to put their children in places and under the tutelage of people that they believe in and they approve of what they're doing, and allow them to do just that. Do not get in the middle of it every single moment of every single day.
That's great perspective. Michael, thank you so much for your time this week. Please don't be a stranger. We'd love to have you on again to talk about marketing with us whenever you like.
We'll be back soon. Thanks again.
Right on. And thank you all for listening to Charter School Superstars.
The views expressed on the preceding program have been those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Academica, its clients, staff, affiliates, or advertisers.